Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm just going to get my little note cards out because I realise there are notes down there too. So I'm going to be old school and new school. But hi, I'm Charity. As Matt said, I just joined Cobalt Music, 5 weeks ago, and it has been intense. I'd say I'm a creator at heart, but definitely not as creative as people who've been there for 17 years, and the company's been around for 20 years. So it's all very exciting. So a seat at the table. Let me just get to this. When I've never actually officially been a product manager, shock horror, but now I lead product for like a huge company. So people are like, how did you get there? And I'm like, product leadership and product management, I don't know if you would agree, are two separate things in me. And I think as a product manager, your task is to deliver features, deliver them well, execute, and then sprint to sprint to sprint, right? As a product leader, your job is to not just set the vision and the mission and all those other fancy things, is actually execute on those things. So this presentation will be about how you can claim a seat at a table, especially a company where, for example, mine is a bit warming towards product, but if your company's kind of like, why should product be taking the lead in these decisions? So I would like this slide deck to kind of talk to you about how do you use your influence and impact to be the voice of reason and be that person that the CEO or the board member comes to and says, John Smith, where are we going next in the future? Where's Cobalt Music going to be in 5 years? And we have a good answer for them. So, well, I've got a clicker. Gosh, fancy. Okay, so first a few stories about impact and influence. So people often think influence is the most important commodity that you can have. Actually, impact, in my opinion, and influence together directly correlate, but both are extremely useful. So people think about influencers, or that person's able to persuade, that person's able to manipulate, which is often seen as like a dirty word in business, but I think like nice manipulation, is a good thing. And then impact might be the person that leaves you with a memory or makes a change in your life. So a few stories about this. So firstly about influence. So if any of you hate Dick Cheney, walk out now. I'm not going to say that I love him, but for some reason I always use US politics to describe leadership. I think they've just got so many wild stories that we can learn from. No offense to any Americans in the room, but the political system is very dramatic and interesting to watch. So I'll firstly talk about Dick Cheney, but again, you've had your warning, so don't throw stones at me. So this is what Dick Cheney says. He said, there was never a contract and I didn't have to ask him, that being Bush, for anything. I was going to have the opportunity to get involved in anything I wanted to get involved in. I don't know if you know how Dick Cheney came to be vice president. Normally during a campaign trail, your VP is someone that's like, I'm going to go do all the fancy stuff. My VP will stay in the White House and just be like a ceremonial role. Dick Cheney was like, that's not what I'm about. He was like helping Bush actually find a VP. So he was helping headhunt. And because Dick Cheney knew everything that Bush wanted, one day Bush was like, do you want to do it? And Dick Cheney was like, sure. Literally, that's how the conversation went. I wasn't there, but that's what I know. So he was very much the most influential vice president we've ever known. We, being like this Western world ever known, because in America, the VP isn't meant to be an influential person. You're meant to sit there for 4 years, if not 8, and just do the president's bidding. Correct me if I'm wrong, any Americans in the room. So, Dick Cheney, the most powerful vice president in history. Not so much the most liked, but he was the most powerful. So, firstly, when it comes to his executive and political presence, he was very much a behind-the-scenes political mover. He knew all the people in the White House, he knew everyone in Congress, he knew everyone in the Senate. Whether you were Democrat or Republican, he had an awareness of everybody. He served as Chief of Staff for General Ford. He was Secretary of Defense without actually having ever served in the military. Try and work that one out, his influence. He just knew exactly what Bush needed, exactly what everyone needed, and played to that, but quietly. He was never overtly like, look at me, look at me. However, his approval rating was shocking. Kamala Harris's is lower than this, but that's by the by. I'm not going to throw Kamala under the bus. So his low approval rating was, from what you may know, he kind of influenced Bush to go to war. He sanctioned spying on American citizens. He actually allowed torture. and all those kind of things. So his influence was huge, but the impact not necessarily great, right? No one liked him. He left office with that. And they say that he basically was able to manipulate presidential decision making, which I used that word before, and it is I can't think of a business way of saying manipulate, so it's not a great word, but in this sense, definitely not great. And then thirdly, he was known to kind of weigh in on any topic across the board, whether it's smallpox or taxes or how are we going to reform the education bills, all that kind of thing. Friends would say that he'd have like salons in his home where he'd invite people from all kinds of spectrums, all kinds of backgrounds, and just sit and listen to them. So I always tell, like a principal product manager, right? Like an individual contributor. I say, how can you be exceptionally T-shaped, deeply knowledgeable and broadly knowledgeable? And Dick Cheney was that. So, and this is what he said. I had a reputation of being somewhat moderate because I got along with people all across the political spectrum. And not every politician can say that, right? They're like, oh, my friends in the Republican Party, they love me. And the Democrats are like, we don't know who this person is. He was known across everyone. If you wanted to get to Bush, irrelevant of who you are, you'd go through him. That kind of says a lot about Bush, but this isn't about the US politics. So, and then a story about impact. So, impact for me is how you use your influence. So you've got the influence, how do you use that to obviously be impactful? So this is where the quote from my talk comes from. So Shirley Chisholm, who you may or may not have heard of, again, back to American politics, but a nicer story this time. She said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So Shirley Chisholm was an American politician. So in 1968, she became the first black woman elected to United States Congress. She represented New York's congressional district for 7 terms. And then in 1972, she became the first black candidate to run for president of the United States. You might not have known that. This is way before Hillary. Everyone's like, oh, Hillary. I was like, no. Shirley Chisholm ran for presidency. And she actually was the first woman, not black, first woman to run for the Democratic Party's nomination. And she's one of my many, many, many heroes, along with my mother, in case she watches this. So Shirley Chisholm, the late, great Shirley Chisholm. So again, impact. So she won without support. So she had multiple degrees. She had a master's from Columbia. She was extremely educated. She was running state legislature in New York for decades. And then when she ran for the House of Representatives, she did that without support of her party, and she won. So despite that, she won without support. Secondly, in Congress, she used the knowledge that she had. Again, I'm talking about that exceptional T-shaped knowledge, not just to influence people to go to war. That wasn't what she did. What she did is she actually introduced 50 pieces of legislation. So when you think about influence versus impact, you see there what she did. She used her background, so she knew what it meant to be from a low-income family, from a family of immigrants, from a family with people of color. And in that knowledge, she led 50 pieces of new legislation, which I think is awesome. And then thirdly, when she announced her bid to become president, she actually got many death threats and actually assassination attempts. And now imagine this. So if you ever watch the American debates where they've got their podiums and I'm speaking, Mr. President, was what Kamala Harris said. So she was actually banned from doing anything on TV. After taking legal action, she was allowed one televised debate. Can you imagine Trump being allowed one televised debate? She was only allowed one. And even after that, she had no financing for her campaign. She had no support. She still kept going. She lost the bid to Senator McGovern, but she went for it anyway, against all odds. And I think that is a great impact. And she said, I want to be remembered as a woman who dared to be a catalyst of change. And she said that just before her death on New Year's Day in 2005. So how do you do all that? How do you become influential and make impact? I would always say, first, make some room. So you can't just drag your folding chair into a table that's already full. I'm not saying get rid of anyone on the board, but I'm just saying make sure where you're going is a space where you're going to be welcomed. So I'll tell you a story about one of my many folding chairs. So once upon a chair, So back when I was leading business analysis at Just Eat, you might have heard of Just Eat or ordered from Just Eat, just before they merged with Takeaway.com, I was actually getting really bored. I was like, I've done business analysis for years. I was getting a bit restless, and I was thinking, what do I do next? And then randomly, I watched Ocean's 8. Don't know if you've seen Ocean's 8. For some reason, I found that massively inspiring. Kate Blanchett looked awesome the entire way through. Anyone seen that? Right, like, see? Great. Anyway, so I was watching that, and for some reason I got weirdly inspired. So I actually presented a proposal to create a whole new product function, and it was a product ownership function. I know some of you are going to be like, product ownership is a role in Scrum, it's not a job title. I did it anyway. So I presented a proposal, and the first thing was clarifying the opportunity. So it wasn't like, hey, make me head of product strategy, make me a principal product strategist. It was, what's the opportunity here? And I actually made sure that when I went through, and I'll talk you through it in a second, all of the proposal, I made sure they announced it at all hands, not for glory, not like charities become a principal product strategist, but more to say, and you need to get on board. So having that come from the most, not important, everyone's important, but the most senior product person in the company. So firstly, clarified the opportunities. I didn't go with a scattergun approach, like, you listen to my idea, you listen to my idea, I've got 10 ideas, you listen, you listen, you listen. I was like, I had 2 ideas and I had a clear front runner. So I was really precise, and I got to know people. I spent a lot of time sitting with product managers and heads of product and business analysts. I'm like, what's all your problems? Just tell me. I'll listen to it all. And from all of that, you kind of start forming, oh, this is what I could do and this is what I think people will find useful. Secondly, I didn't clutter them with loads of ideas. I thought, okay, I have a strong idea, I've got one alternative, this is what I really want to do. And I said, here's what I want to do. I want to build this product ownership function, and you don't have to do anything. Like, I've already thought of all the risks. I've talked to all the people that are going to be potentially, affected by this. I've done it all. Don't worry, I've de-risked it. I'll do it for you. And then thirdly, I didn't just sit back. After I did all of that, I made sure I put together a plan. And remember I said at the beginning, strategy and leadership is about executing that plan well. I've got my 10-minute warning, so I'm going to through the rest. Okay, so I'll just quickly show you this. So these aren't slides for today. These are just slides from that presentation I was saying. I did a proposal. So I presented them the challenges. You don't have to read it, don't worry. I put together the opportunity. I was like, here's what I'll do. And then I said I did an organizational structure, taking the names off. And this is what I literally did. Like 3 years ago, I was like, hey, Chief Product Officer and Chief Delivery Officer, I'm going to, look at that one. I'm going to report into you. And I was like, I gave them options, but again, I wasn't like, where do you think I should sit in the organization? I was like, here's where I think I should sit. You choose. It's either one of the two. I know it's very bold. And then I did like a 12-month plan for them. So you don't have to read this. It's just to show what I did. Okay, but how do you do all this? So clarify the opportunity. I'm going to whistle through these. Get to know people. Like I said before, I understood all people's grievances. I understood people started to know me and know that I was out there to try and help them. Then be known by others. If no one knows who you are you actually going to make a difference to them? If Dick Cheney was never known for good or bad, would he ever made a difference? Thirdly, think about volunteering up to a point. People often think, I'm just going to go volunteer with this team. And before you know it, you're doing 2 times your work in a week because you're helping out to get known. But actually volunteer up till a point. Don't just give your everything, and make sure you're getting something back from that. Fourthly, speak where you're usually silent. If you're in meetings, you're normally the observant one. By the by, that's just a waste of your time. But if you want to say something, make your voice heard, have an opinion, get to be known. Then fifthly, if that's a word, if this is clicking, get yourself included. So be included in things you're not normally included in. Be forceful. What arenas do you want to step into? Where do you want to be heard and where do you want to be known? 6, test the ideas with new colleagues. I didn't just say, because I knew the business analysts were going to migrate into that PO role. I wasn't like, here you go, you're a PO now. I tested it. I was like, what would you think if you were doing this kind of work? And what would you think if you were doing that kind of work? And I got a sense of when I was proposing the work to the C-suite, it was like, oh, okay, she already has talked to these people. Like, they're on board with this. It's not going to be so much of a challenge. And the 7th, test yourself and be sure this is exactly what you want. Because when I did that, I was like, oh crap, I've actually got to do it now. So make sure it's actually something you've got the energy to do, because that whole ramp up of the proposal and then there's the doing it. Okay, But everyone's going to be like, well, what about me? Because it's all like, I want to do all these things. The people in the room are going to be like, what's in it for me? Everyone's always going to ask, what's in it for me? So I did these like little drawings. So we always talk about product market fit, right? We all know what that is. But we've got people proposal fit. So I had my idea, but then you want to think, how do you push more of your idea onto people? That sounds awful, but how do you push more of it onto people? And how do you get more of your proposal included? And for me, that's about making sure that you're giving the people in the room what they want at the same time as it being mutually beneficial for you. So plan the change and execute it well. So these are just, I think these slides are going to be shared afterwards, right? Okay, so you can read them after. Basically, what this says is all the things you're planning, make sure you've thought of everything. How are you going to communicate it? What steps are you going to have in place? What risks do you see coming up ahead of you? Who's going to be impacted? All that good stuff. Think about it, but then measure it as well. What's the measurement of success? Okay, people have changed their job titles. And what? How's it affecting the company? What's the value adds for the business at the end of the day? And how can that success be scaled as well? Thank you. So Shirley Chisholm, again, there's lots of these quotes peppered through. So mother always said that when I was 3, I used to get to the 6- and 7-year-old kids on the block and punch them and say, listen to me, I'm not advocating violence, but, get people to pay attention. Not in this way, but she was a child. But yeah, get people to pay attention. Because you have a voice, and that's a really powerful thing, but don't just go saying anything. Make sure what you have to say makes sense. So be the voice of differentiation. 1, focus on today as well as tomorrow. Some people do one or the other. So right now with my team, I'm like, make sure you're focusing on delivering good things today, but also make sure that we're set for the future in 5 years' time. So be that voice of differentiation. Secondly, bring something different to the table. If you're like, yeah, I agree. That's boring. Don't be there. Leave the meeting. You're not needed. Bring something different to the table. And then third, think about how you can tell a technical story very simply. Because, for example, in the music industry, which is way more complex than I realized, I can be rattling away about royalties management to our global creative director, and she's like, but if I say, this is the way your artists get paid, she's like, oh, okay, do you know what I mean? So simplify the message. And well done. After all of this, you're exceptional, then what? Do it again, do it again. Be that person, be that voice. Make sure your company is product-led and that you're at the helm of that. Because as Shirley Chisholm said, last Shirley Chisholm quote, I promise, you don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing the ideas and having impact, I would add to that. Thank you very much.
So again, if you have questions, you can jump onto Slido and ask those, or we can run a mic. I'll give you a second to type those questions in. First of all, thank you for your very polite handling of American politics. It doesn't get more graceful than that, and thank you for highlighting some true leaders in there. Any presentation with Shirley Chisholm gets extra points at this conference. Also, small note, fifthly is now a word at this conference, so any future speakers, you're welcome to use that. That's in our lexicon. And then I just love your thought about being the voice of reason.
Yeah.
We actually, at K15D, we just had kind of a rough product meeting where our engineers who are in the here and now met with our PMs who are in the future. And there was a really great moment of working through that emotionally a lot. So that idea that you have to bring both is an incredible challenge. You're like a therapist among many other things. So This is also a great program for vetting potential presidents,
Yes.
apparently. I won't handle that as gracefully. So other question, how do you speak up when you're usually a silent person? How do you remain authentic, not being contrarian for the sake of it?
Yeah, it might not appear that way. I'm very introverted. Normally people laugh when I say that, but I promise I'm introverted. So usually for me, it might not be in that meeting. It might be a Slack message or an email afterwards being like, oh, the point you raised about da-da-da-da-da was so great. Can we have a one-on-one or whatever to discuss it? And if that means there were 10 people in the meeting, you have one-on-ones with 10 people, and so be it. If you don't feel comfortable talking in the meeting, don't push yourself, right? And there's ways in which you can speak. It doesn't have to be audibly. It could be an email. It can be, I was talking to Charity on a one-on-one the other day. Imagine like your CPO's in the C-suite meeting. She said, Charity, you raised a really good idea. And before you know it, your voice and your name is in the room, but you're not even there. So yeah, that would be my advice, is don't push it because that's awkward, but be authentic, as the question says.
We have a question in the room. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand until now. If you would say it, we'll just repeat it.
Speak up. So it's not more of a question, but also right in line with what you're saying, which is, I think the first step is, like you rightfully said, take ownership. Create a clear rule of speak out tonight. Build your confidence, ultimately your role. Ensure having self-confidence, coaching, right? That is also a way of building your resilience, building your confidence, right? That is also a way of building your resilience, building your
Yeah, so is that coming from me?
No, just testing the mic.
Okay, so
Yeah, it's okay.
yeah, that's a great point. And actually, I'll tell you one quick thing. So
Is that coming from me?
this would
No,
be
just
very
testing
uncomfortable
the
for
mic.
me.
Okay,
My
so
old-
it's CFO,
yeah, that's a
my
great
old
point. And actually, I'll tell you one
I got
quick
his
thing.
speaking
So
engagement.
I
So
do
this
things
would
that
be
feel a
very
little bit
uncomfortable
uncomfortable.
for me.
My
Not
old
wildly
CFO left my
uncomfortable,
old
but just
organization.
keep pushing that
I got his speaking
barrier.
engagement. So do things
It's not
that feel a
me,
little
okay.
bit uncomfortable. Not wildly uncomfortable, but just
Any other
keep pushing
questions
that-
in the room?
That barrier.
Now is a good time. Later is also a good time.
Cool.
If there are questions in the room, maybe now is a good time. Later is also a good time. If you're maybe feeling like one of those introverts, or you're feeling introverted at this time,
Very moment.
Charity, you'll be here both days.
No.
Okay.